Hello, this is Bob McClellan. This is the third and final screencast in a series about Presentation Builder. If you have not done so, you should probably view the first two parts at the links shown before watching this one. In this part, I will be showing how Presentation Builder handles all the relationships to parts other than slides, master slides, layouts, and themes, since those were covered in part 2. I will be looking at comments, table styles, images, audio, and more. So let's get started. In Presentation Builder, when I'm copying slides, I also look to see, right down here, if there is a slide comments part. And now I'm going to show you what that looks like, and I'm going to go into detail with this copy comments method. So here's a very simple one slide presentation, and I'm going to add comments to it. And there's my comment. And then I'll add another one. And then I'm going to just go ahead into the options here. Change this quickly and add one more comment from a different author. Save. Then I'm going to open this up. As before, I'm going to use the OpenXML package editor power tool for Visual Studio 2010, which I've installed in order to view these easily within Visual Studio. And I'm going to look down here at my slide, and I see that I have a comment part relationship. I will open that. Reformat with the Control-ED. And you will see here that the comments all appear completely within this part. Without this part, the comments would not exist. There are no references from the slide to the comments other than the relationship to the part itself. And see these little markers here. Those are the positions defined for each one with the X and Y values. And then also in the CM element, you'll see there's an author ID of 0 or 1 with my second author that I put in there. If I go to the presentation, you can see there is a comment authors reference or relationship. And there's my list of authors with the ID 0 or 1 for Bob or Joe. If you're thinking ahead, you will realize that these IDs will overlap if there are comments in two different presentation documents. So I need to reassign those IDs as I copy them over. Also, I almost forgot to mention there's these last index, and that CLR is the color index. Those values also need to be correct. So the last index is always the last ID or index number on the comment. If I go back here, you can see there's an index, that IDX attribute on each of the CM elements. And so for author 0, the last index is 2. For author 1, it's 1, and those need to be kept updated in this as well. So Presentation Builder does all that in this copy comments method. So I'm going to go down to there. Here's copy comments. So the first step is just to copy over the slide comments part. And once I have it copied, then I will update the new version to get all the values corrected for its new destination. I call this find comments author method, which will give me the element of the new or the author in the new document, and it will automatically add it. That find comments author will add it if it's not there. And then I go through to update the last index values correctly and set those indexes in the comments and so on. So this loop, of course, you have to loop through all the comments and make sure they're all updated. So that loop just goes through, corrects the author ID, fixes up the index values, and that's all that there is to it. Now, the find comments author is a little more involved, actually, because first of all, if there is no comment authors part in the new document, it has to create an empty one. So that's the first thing that happens at the top. And then it looks to find out if there is an author. If there isn't, then it creates it with the proper initial values. Now, one of the things that I kind of simplified here is I make the color index the same as the ID for that author. These color indexes are normally assigned in sequential order, and so I just did the same thing. That means that it is possible for your color index to be completely different from any of the source presentations. If you do them in just the right order, they'll shift all around. They'll shift the authors all around. But that I don't think is too significant, since they'll still have all distinct colors in the new document. So that is all there is to it. As you can see here, most of the copying process is just a matter of stepping through and making sure all references that will no longer be valid are updated to be valid values, or IDs, and etc. Table styles are much simpler. I'm going to go back to where I call the table styles. So copy table styles is called for each slide as it's copied. And once it's called just once for each one. So it's got to find any references to those table styles. So it does a loop here to find all of the table style elements. And table style elements, let me show you really quickly, are very, very simple. I'll show you a table very quickly here in a new slide. There we go. Getting to my slide. You see there's no reference, no relationship for table styles, but right here there is an element, table style ID, and the contents are this GUID that refers to an entry here, which is the medium style 2 accent 1, I believe. I didn't look closely at the IDs. Yes, those match. And if it's that the table styles are just added as they appear, with a little experimentation, I found that if the GUID is in there, it at least PowerPoint picks up the table style anyway, even if it's not in this table, but I thought it would be best to copy them anyway. So whenever the table style appears, all I have to do is look and see if the style is in this part, and if it's not, I copy it over. This is particularly easy because these IDs are GUIDs, so they never overlap across any presentation document in the world, I guess. So that makes it a very simple process. There's no fixing up of the ID like there was with the comments. And that's all this does here. It's going through all the style IDs. Oh, sorry. It loops through getting the style IDs. If there is a style ID, it looks it up in the old table styles part so that it knows what it will need to copy over. Then it checks the new document. If the new document does not have a table styles part, it needs to create one. And then it adds in the one that it got from the old table style. So it's really pretty straightforward. Now that covers the two sort of specific cases for Presentation Builder. The rest of these are done pretty much the same way as they were done in Document Builder, because all these other relationship parts are what I would call whole parts, where the relationship, for example, to an image, if there's a reference to an image, then the whole image part is copied, and then all that has to be done in the document is update the reference. There are two cases of those, of these whole part copies. One is where there is an as I just said, an explicit reference to it, where the ID has to be updated. And the other case is when there's an implicit reference and there is no ID to be updated, and then all that has to be done is to copy it when they're present. So I'm going to just jump to the second one here because they're simpler. In that second case, I'm going back up to my slides. And here in the slides, go up to my slide copies here. Here are my slide copies. There's only a couple of things. The notes slide part. So a notes slide part either is there or not. If the slide has notes, it'll have this notes slide part, and all I have to do is copy it and add the correct references to it. The slide comments are the only part that go with the slide. In the previous screencast, I talked about some of these parts that are copied for the presentation, but those are the only other cases that I have found in presentation documents. The other case is handled in a somewhat generic, or as much generic as possible fashion in Presentation Builder, and that's the case where there's explicit references. And I had skipped over this table before. This table is a list of all the elements and their attributes where there are explicit references, and this table is then used by methods down below to quickly find all the elements and attributes that need to be updated. So I'm going to go down to that part of the code, which starts with copy-related parts for content parts. And this method is going through and making sure that for each reference that exists in the slide or part that we're copying, it's going to properly copy the whole part that it refers to. So for example, the first thing it does here is go through all the different kinds of images. Images have to use this copy-related image, which I'm going to talk about later, because that helps make sure that images that repeat don't get copied into the destination more than once. The next example here is this loop through the diagrams. And diagrams are copied in a different way and have to, in particular, diagrams can have additional references, and those need to be copied as well. That's where we start getting this chaining of relationship to relationship. And I'm not going to go over this too much because the diagrams are exactly the same as in Document Builder. It's just following through all these making the proper connections. Another one is an embedded object, the OLE. And again, it's just going to make sure it's creating the right kind of part in the new destination and copying it over, either an embedded object or an embedded package. And then actually, because embedded objects are not XML, it has to do a byte copy between the two streams to get those objects copied over. Then we go into charts, and charts are sort of similar to diagrams. They can also, again, refer to other objects, so they have to copy their related parts, again, on that chain. And then we have shapes. Shapes are another one where they can refer to another object in the chain. And here we go again. Now we get down to sounds, or audio. The audio files are also byte parts, but they have to be created a little differently. So I have a method on call to copy the sounds. These two cases are looking at objects that are specific to either the slide part or the slide master part, because these have to be created, the objects have to be created a little bit differently depending on what the parent part is. And so I had to create these special loops to copy sounds and drawing parts, the VML drawing parts. Now VML is considered transitional. It's I believe the expectation is it'll be phased out in a future version, but they are still being created in many PowerPoint presentation documents. So I do a really simple kind of copy of those. Then here are some of the support methods. The copy chart objects does more of the detailed copying of what's in the chart that needs to move. Then there's the update content. This is a sort of quick generic, again, these generic functions that make it easy. The update content and remove content are just fixing up those relationship IDs using that table defined at the top. Add relationships is used for relationships that don't relate to parts, like a hyperlink. Those are external. There's no part. There's just all the information is in the relationship itself. And so these are another group that need to be copied over. Things like external references to images and audio and video files are also included in there. So those things, there's no part that goes with them, just the relationship itself. But they still need, the relationships need to be created, and they will have new IDs, and those IDs need to be corrected in the destination. Now, copy-related image uses this images list to keep track of all the images that exist in the new document. And then whenever it gets a new image to copy over, it loads it up and then calls this manage image copy to compare the two and see if they are the same. And if they are, then it will not bother to create that image in the new document, just uses the one that's there. And once it figures out whether or not it's creating one or not, if it has to create a new one, it has to go through this big test to see what kind of or which type of part it's going to add the image to, because we have to call the proper add image part for whatever it's relating to, whatever the source reference to the image is. And then that, if it doesn't need to actually add a new part, then it just updates the relationship. So that makes it very efficient for copying images, where if you're referring to the same image a lot of times, especially even across different source documents, it'll still match them up and only copy each unique image once. The manage image copy just handles that comparison and deciding whether or not it needs to add a new one in or not. Copy-related sound, kind of somewhat similar to the images, except it doesn't bother to make them it doesn't worry about whether or not they're unique, but it does need to create the proper audio reference relationship depending on which part it is referring to that audio. And that is the end of those whole part copies, as I think of them. Even though I haven't gone into all the nitty-gritty details of this, I think if you step through the code, it's clear enough what's going on, especially if you're somewhat familiar with the OpenXML SDK. Almost all of this code is just fixing up the references that change as things are copied into a new document. So this concludes the series on Presentation Builder. I hope you found it interesting to see how much detailed work you can do on copying parts from one document to another. It is complicated at first, but once you work through all the different kinds of relationships that can exist, then the process isn't so bad. This concludes that series, and I hope you enjoy the Presentation Builder.